All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Valentine. But for the grace of God, I haven't had a drink or drugs since December 28th, 1987. So this year will be 38 years of recovery in a few months here. Earlier this month, my sponsor in AA, some of you know him, Rick P., he got his 50-year coin chip, right? And so he is 77 years old. He says, well, my whole life, I just wanted to make it to 50 years and 77, so I guess I can die now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's so dumb. He said, well, I don't know what to do next. I said, well, you've been pretty good at figuring it out go for 60 years of recovery. He goes, I don't know if I want to live that long, you know. So life is good. Um, I'm in currently approaching 1 year of retirement, and some of you heard that my decision each morning is, do I fish from the kayak? Do I fish from the beach? Or do I go play golf? And once in a while I might draw or read or do nothing. And, I kind of actually thoroughly enjoy all that. And of course, there's the intermittent doctor's appointments and things you got to do when you get old, but that's okay too. Um, So I am currently in Warwick, Rhode Island. Got a little place on the water out here. Thoroughly enjoy that, so I can get to the beach pretty easily or out in the water pretty easily. And we are here to discuss supervision. So I want to ask you guys, your name, where you're sitting, and I think the first question is, how do you think of supervision? Just in general, how do you think of it? And who would like to go first? Now, see, there's only like, including you, Travis, there's only eight of you. And so this is going to be recorded for posterity. So I need all of you to contribute your genius and your superior intellect and your outstanding experience to this chat, okay? All right, good. So no pressure. Shireen, how are you?
Good morning. My name is Shireen. I work for CCAR. I'm presently in New Haven, CCAR Center. And supervision, no matter how old I get, I'm always need to be supervised because it's just going to give me good structure and show me from the bottom to the top of how to do it. And I want to master things right. So that structure will keep me balanced. I'm good with structure because if I'm left up to my own devices, it's going to go left real quick. So supervision for me is structure and someone strong that knows and can help me.
Structure strong. So expand on that a little bit more for me. What do you mean by structure and strength in terms of what?
Okay. If I'm weak in a situation, I like that there's somebody higher than me to say, okay, it's not done that way. Let's do it this way, you know, to help me re-look at things, to help me restructure how I would implement something or how I would do the work. But the structure is like my guidance. I would say
Okay.
guidance for me.
Mhm. Thank you, Shireen. Thanks for starting us off. Hello, Ruth. Good to see you. Uh, Amber, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, everybody. I'm wondering what Phil is shooting for golf, what the score is.
It's mid 40s. I'm not happy with that because back in the day, I could break 40 pretty regularly for 9 holes. So shoot.
I'm happy with 40.
But I've never had so much fun shooting in the 90s. I spent too much money on a new set of pings, so I got nice light old man irons and woods and can swing easy and the ball goes when I do it. But I'll get
Nice.
I'll get there. I'll be playing old man golf. You know what old man golf is. You just knock in front of the green and get up and down from everywhere, and people get mad at you. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, my name is Amber and I am in Neenah, Wisconsin, which is about um 30 minutes from Green Bay. So supervision to me, I feel like I mean, it's definitely a two-way street, between the two people. In my specific role as a program supervisor, it helps me to stay in the loop with what's going on with my coaches because they are contracted out. So, being in this line of work, sometimes there are relapses or sometimes there are struggles with recovery coaches. So I feel like supervision allows me to, stay in the loop. And if there's anything that needs to be addressed on a monthly basis, we can do that. And also it's just to make sure that, all expectations and requirements are being met because, they do the ethics and we go through that in the beginning, but if we're meeting on a routine basis, then we can make sure that we're following the ethics and also if there's any new updates that come out or, any changes to the program that the supervision is a place to do that. So,
How would you define supervision to an 8-year-old?
ooh. Well, if you go that route, it's kind of like being watched, right?
Ah, all right. I can kind of like, okay, thanks. I like
Yeah.
that. All right. Being watcher, being the watcher.
Hmm.
Gotcha. Ed,
Good morning, everyone.
good morning, Ed.
Uh, I'm coming to you live from Weehawken, New Jersey, here in my apartment, right by the Lincoln Tunnel entrance. And supervision. I often ask myself, what are some of the best choices I made in my life? And one of the choices was in high school, I took Latin. And consequently, I always look at words from their base origin.
Yeah, please.
And if we look at the word supervision, which I remember,
Hmm.
is based on the word supervidere, meaning super, meaning from above, videre, to see. So when we look at supervision, we're looking at it from a different angle, from above looking down. So I would define supervision as looking at something from above, from a strategic view, and offering suggestions of what I see.
Well, I'm writing all that down. So thank you, Ed. That was wonderful. Appreciate that. Virginia,
Good morning, everybody. Good to be back. Good to see you, Phil.
yeah.
I'm sitting here at the Waterbury Recovery Community Center. I'm the center manager, and it's good to be on this recording. And when I think about supervision, I think of it for me as a two-way street. I think of it in terms of getting guidance and offering guidance to a peer or someone that you're working with on ways to become a better staff member, a better recovery coach. Um, so yeah, I think of it as a two-way street. I think that a supervisee learns from a supervisor as well as a supervisor learning from a supervisee.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Barry.
Yeah. So my vision as a supervisor has changed over time. It used to be the person I hid from
The
for a
person you
long
up
time.
from?
I hid from. That's the person at the job that I
You
hid from.
hid, like
Yeah.
HID. You hid from
HID.
your
Like, yo, wherever the supervisor is, I'm not gonna be there. But
Okay.
it's definitely changed over time. I think now that I understand supervision as a support role is you support a person in completing whatever task they need to complete, and support can look like a whole lot of different things. Sometimes people need, one-on-one support. Sometimes some people need to be watched. Some people need to be left, given the task and left the ability to be able to complete the task on their own. And I think supervision is just that you kind of make sure the person has what they need.
Thank you, Barry. Well said. Travis.
Hi, everybody. Travis Cowett here, coming to you live from my home office here in Ellington, Connecticut. Was it, how do I think of coaching, or how do I think of supervision, or how do I see
Yeah.
it?
Well, okay. Well, you pick one.
Okay. Well, I kind of gave away the answer. I misspoke, little Freudian slip there. I see it as coaching. And that can look like a lot of different things. I heard someone say like walking alongside someone, asking questions like, how can I support you in your role today? Or perhaps there's a change from higher up, a new expectation. These are the expectations. How can I support you in that? Right. So again, I think it's about meeting the individual where they're at, but also serving as the buffer between them and the agency we work for or serve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hilo, good to see you again, my friend. How are you?
I am well, Phil. It's great to see you as well, and good to see everyone. I am Hilubian. I am here. If you see my fancy background, because I am in the detention center, so
Are they letting you out?
I think they'll let me out. The gift
Okay,
of
good.
recovery, the gifts of recovery is that's what's happening. So thank you again. Good to see everybody. I think I caught the question, about supervision.
Hmm.
I think supervision is a collaborative, safe space for the peer and the supervisor to be in, a supportive role as the supervisor for the peer to be able to express and talk about what's on their mind, or as well as challenges they may be experiencing. But in the process, it's the collaborative space to really build on the next visit, on the next person you see, and professional development, and a place to where really guide and support, as well as role play well, before they go out into an engagement. So I use it as a place of collaboration and growth. You know, so I think it's essential that appropriate level of peer supervision is happening in organizations.
Okay. Thank you, Hilo. Hi, Ruth. Wonderful to see you.
Hi there, Phil, and hi everybody, and great to see you. I love your end of summer shirt, Phil. Uh, let's keep it colorful. Let's keep it n loud.
You want to see my red fishing shorts too?
Um, we can perhaps forego that pleasure. Uh, and of course, supervision, what a fabulous topic. I should say that I'm broadcasting from beautiful Brooklyn. It's a little bit clouded over here at the moment, but this is a lovely time of the year in New York City. If you aren't here, come visit. Supervision. I think, sort of how we think about supervision is to a large extent determined by what is the context in which we're discussing supervision. Supervision for me as a coach in private practice is very different from supervision in an agency. And I do think it's important that we keep those distinctions in mind. There's a further distinction that I'd like to bring into any conversation about supervision, about the supervisory role. In an agency or in a workplace, it seems to me that the supervisory role is split between two functions. There's a very strong managerial element to supervision. Sort of the supervisor is responsible for seeing that the services of the agency are implemented in an appropriate manner. And that can often include making sure that individual staff members are where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing on behalf of the agency.
Hmm.
That's on the one side. On the other side, I think that supervisors have a strong mentoring role, and and that's where sort of all the conversations about, sort of what's working, what could be better, how can I help, can we role play? I love that reference from earlier. Sort of can I suggest perhaps tracks that would be useful for you when you're building your continuing education credits, additional training that you might find supportive of your practice, and so on. So that, that bifurcated, if you like, managerial and mentoring role, that puts a lot of pressure on individual supervisors who have a hell of a lot of other things to be doing in their agency roles. And sort of, and that's something I think that for practitioners, we want to extend just a little compassion to the individual supervisor who has so much to do in her role, just as we have so much to do on our roles. A couple of other things I'd just like to say very, very quickly, Phil, if I may.
Of course.
First off, I love these meetings because we learn such interesting and eclectic things about each other. Ed and I have been pals for 10 years. I never knew that he was a Latinate, and and that's something that we share. So of course I don't have to go rummaging around for the roots of supervision because Ed's done it already. But we were clearly trained by the same people in our schooling, and I never knew that. So that's great fun for me. And the final fun fact I want to leave you with for now is that it's my birthday.
Is it?
Yes.
Happy
Phil know me
birthday.
long enough to know me as a quintessential Virgo. So,
Wow.
sharing this time with you folks is such a pleasure.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Well, so it talk like when you're in an agency, and it's a lot less than like obviously when you're self-employed.
Mhm.
But an agency you have, and I agree with 100% with you, but this is part is managerial slash administrative, right? That you got to kind of keep the employee within the structure of the agency, whatever that is. And the other one is the coaching. If you were going to get assigned percentages, what do you think the percentages are of time spent to each?
That's a great question. And I'm sure that agencies would be very annoyed for me commenting on it because I don't have one of those jobs.
Yeah.
I work in private practice, and I personally pay for my supervision out of my business expenses, and I have been doing that for 20 plus years. And I consider it to be a fundamental professional commitment. As for sort of the balance between managerial functions and mentoring functions,
Hmm.
I wouldn't want to see that written in stone. Individual agencies will have more or less onerous requirements on the supervisor. But equally, supervisees will need more or less input from a supervisor, on a week-to-week basis.
Hmm.
And I think it's pretty much like so much in our field that the responsibility is on us to respond to what's real and in front of us and in the moment, and to be comfortable enough about our practice to be able to be spontaneous in terms of what's needed. Ideally, the balance between management and mentoring, I suppose you could ideally say 50-50, but
Hmm.
what in this world is so balanced?
Right. Exactly. Hey, Barry, you have any thoughts about how much time as a supervisor you spend on managerial administrative as opposed to direct kind of like coaching and support?
I think when you make, what you and Art used to say, do you understand what I'm asking you to do? When you make that clear, when you make that real clear on, the task and understanding what is expected of you, I think you spend more time in that support mentoring role than you do in that role, because that
Oh,
role,
good.
people may vary off, but if they understand what their task is, then you don't have to spend a lot of time going over that.
Gotcha. Amber, how'd you know I was going to ask you too?
Probably because my face, and I can never like control my face. Yeah, so I love that you brought this up because I mean, this is something that I've struggled with being in this position the entire time I've been in this position, right? And like the program has grown tremendously and the responsibilities have grown. However, I haven't gotten any help, right? So it started out that the mentoring and the manager roles were a little bit closer to each other, a little bit, closely balanced. Now it's not. I mean, I can straight out say that. Like it is about 80% of manager and about 20% of the mentoring. And the mentoring is my favorite part, right? And so like I feel like there's a reason I'm here today because it's like I have been going through this and when you throw into all the things like funding and all of that stuff, it is what it is, and it's just something that I've been experiencing where I can see that, the responsibilities just keep adding and adding. And then, spending time with the coaches, which is my favorite part, seems to be getting lower. So I really, I appreciate Ruth's comment about the compassion about it because there's so much to do. And, there's other organizations that have two or three supervisors that kind of, are able to spread out those roles. And it's just me, with 20 some coaches. And it's like, it can be overwhelming. So I just wanted to say I appreciate you bringing this up. And it's good to have, support and thoughts with it too. So.
So what can you do about it? Is there any way you could reduce the management or administrative? Just a question. You don't even have to answer that. But just as to get
Yeah.
it back in balance. Helu, you have any thoughts on on the two sides? Because I know you've been involved for a while too.
Just pretty much the same as the program has grown here, also here at the county and with the health department, and with the supervision and the peers we have that are out in the field and being able to mentor and guide in that. But the responsibilities of the management piece with the grants and managing those and being able to make sure everything is the deliverables, and BHA is always changing up those criteria, and it's like, and then they tell you last minute. So trying to get ahead of all that, it has taken on a lot more bigger role in terms of the managerial, the administrative piece, a little bit more in that. And I would say it's about a 60-40. But again, if I could have it, I would have it 90% in them. But a good question is what can you do about it? And we had talked about with our program leadership about creating other leadership managerial positions to get people
Right.
in that, so we'll free us up. So we'll see.
Interesting in the part in the roles in the Recovery Coach Academy, where many years ago now, Bill White talked about the paperwork part that was ever growing, and what do we do about that? And I think the supervisor, when they're in agencies, the paperwork or the administrative tasks have become burdensome in a lot of ways, and which we had always we have warned against, that we're just repeating the past, like the paperwork that's required of clinicians and counselors is in Connecticut back, well, it hadn't really changed much, but it was most
Right.
counselors say it's 90 to 95% paperwork, 5% in front of the client. And I'm like, that's not what we hire counselors to do, right? It's not what we hire coaches to do. And hopefully, I'm baffled by the need for administration and paperwork. But anyway, um, next question.
Actually,
Yeah, go
Phil,
ahead, Ruth.
could I just answer that very briefly on the paperwork question?
Hmm.
Sort of, we know you, Phil, as a role absolutist. And that's what I absolutely love about you. Sort of you would, of course, do away with, sort of all this paperwork. And so would I. But one of the realities in the field, and others can speak more authoritatively to this than I, but one of the realities in the field is that peer support specialists are paid via Medicaid. Medicaid are, sort of your tax dollars and my tax dollars at work. There have to be accountability structures for where those monies are going. Hence the need for credentialing, which I know that you're deeply opposed to, Phil, and hence the need for all this bloody paperwork. Because of course, in the world of bureaucracy, in the world of Medicaid, in the world of being accountable for public funds, the use of public funds, if it isn't written down and reported on some damn document somewhere, it never happened. And if it never happened, it can't be paid for. So, so I think part of the problem here is not of our making. It's very much external to us, but part of the circumstances in which so many folks like us are employed.
Yeah, that could open up a whole
Yeah.
another conversation because I also, knowing me, I also question about um again, it's more about relationships. So sometimes we even like one of the requirements early on in CCAR was we had to do GIPRA reporting, Government Performance and Results Act. And the form was ridiculous. So we pushed back and we got that changed and we didn't have to do the as amount of the reporting that they required of us. And the other part to that is even with the GIPR data, and this is just me, and especially with the state, the reports we had to do early on that we ended up not doing because I challenged the state. I said, does anyone actually read these reports? And nobody read them. And so, like Tom Kirk was like, then why are we having people do these if we're not reading them, you know? And it became, and I felt, it's a two-edged sword, right? Like you're not reporting anything anymore. They're just checking your finances to make sure they're somewhat in order. But I think we give almost too much power to this need to fall into the process in the system. And not to say that people don't do that, but it's like, to me, it's a form of control. And there are people, even within the system, that don't need as much control as others. It's almost like the luck of the draw, who you get that's supervising, monitoring your own program. It's just like a luck of the draw kind of thing. But anyway. Yeah. Wow. Get me all fired up. But next question, I'm just used to being out on the boat wondering why, what lure to throw next, that kind of thing. Or what club do I hit into this green? Um, all right. You guys have a lot of experience in the field of recovery coaching, because that's my bailiwick, is what are some of the common supervision errors? Or what is a common error that you wanted to highlight? What is a common error or area of improvement? Oh, come on. You guys don't have anything? Ed?
Uh, you mentioned the word relationship, and I think supervision is a form of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that relationship, some of the best supervisors I ever had in my life always insisted on one thing, that they are not mind readers, that they can supervise and they can support. But the fact that they're not supervisors, they always relied on my ability to have the comfort level to come to them when I had a problem so they could advise the support, etc. And I think part of supervision also is for me, I believe, is the ability to create a relationship of trust so that someone can come to me in need. I remember one of my first early bosses sat me down, and my first correction and the first issue she had with me is she said, I'm not a mind reader. If you have a problem, you need to come to me. How can I help and support you? I'm working with a number of people. So I think developing that supervision of a relationship that is two-way, that I have individuals that I supervise who are comfortable coming to me with their issues that I can support and work with them on to resolve.
So, so is there an error in there or something that needs correcting?
We don't know. There may not be any area. We may supervise to see that something is just simply not happening that's supposed to be happening.
So let me ask you the question another way. So if this is the error that the supervisor is relying on the recovery to tell them something is wrong?
No, I don't think there is a trust, a relationship that someone who is facing something, uh, it goes both ways. As a
Okay.
supervisor, I cannot only just rely on them, I also have to do my due diligence and my supervising as well.
Yes,
But
that's
sometimes
silly.
we won't always see things. But also I can supersede and resolve issues quicker if they're coming to me as well, if they are not comfortable or they are seeing something that's happening.
Yeah, we had a person that worked at CCAR, and she always said trust but verify. And
Yes.
I didn't I thought that was the a contradiction of the utmost. Like, how are you trusting someone if you have to go verify it? But I just that's not trusting. But anyway.
But also,
Yeah.
if I'm doing something wrong, sometimes I don't know that I'm doing something wrong.
Right. And so would you go to your supervisor and say, there would be no reason for you to go to the supervisor if you didn't think you were doing anything wrong or there was a problem.
Supervision for me is not only finding the things that are not going right, it is also making sure that I'm talking to them and supporting them things on things that they are doing right.
Exactly. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. I agree.
But
Travis.
as a
Oh, go
peer,
ahead.
a peer will always find that uncomfortable feeling when they're doing something that others are looking at them cross-eyed, or I have this feeling, what's not happening here? And I just sit there, and 6 months later, it grows into a problem. Uh, the supervisional relationship has to go back and forth. As someone who I'm being supervised by, I need to feel comfortable to go to that person if I'm not comfortable with something.
Right. And I think what we're getting at is what you talked a little bit about the Latin roots from above to see, right? So
Yes.
the assumption might be that people will have the strength and the courage to go above themselves and see that as dangerous and or intimidating and not make that. And so I think the best supervisors have to level that playing field. It has to be not from above, but next to somehow. So, but that's just a random thought as I'm working this out in my head too.
Cool.
Travis.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And this is one that I've been on both sides of, certainly guilty of, but being a professional friend instead of a friendly professional, right? Kind of blurring that line. And the problem with that is it operates under the assumption that if I am good to this person, if I'm nice to this person that I'm supervising, then they will do well at their job, right? And I've learned the hard way on that. I'm highly empathetic. I like to think I make friends with everybody, but that blurs expectations. And something I've learned from you, Phil, is that clear expectations are kind. So I've learned to be a little bit more stern, I suppose, in my practice. But
Well,
that's
it feels stern to you, but I don't know that you could ever really be like the epitome of the word stern.
right.
Well, we work for Jolie, who is the greatest example of someone that can be kind and firm at the same time,
Yeah, that's, yeah, perfect example.
right? Yeah, she can be firm and kind at the same time. Windia.
Hi. I think there's a few errors, but I think one of the biggest ones, especially if it's somebody who's a clinical supervisor or has a clinical hat as a supervisor,
Hmm.
is just not understanding the recovery coach model and not understanding the role in general, and which leads to then, the recovery coach really not understanding their role or drifting into a different lane. So I think that's one of the things that I've seen.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Spot on. Hilo.
Yes, I think that the fix or challenge can be for me in my where I am is the consistency of providing the supervision, the consistency and how it's delivered. I think being pulled in so many different ways as being short-staffed and your intentions and being able to get supervision done on a regular basis, timing and schedule may not be a challenge for most, but for us, because we get pulled so many times in the last minute stuff and figuring out to be able to reschedule the supervision. And then sometimes instead of formal supervision, we kind of will do a check-in, and it's not really replacement for supervision, no, but it's a check-in, So I think that's where the fix can happen is that to um, in the midst of so many parts moving while you're scheduling and you have a regular schedule for supervision, but it changes up and that's something we're working on. Yeah.
So, in your mind, what's the difference between a check-in and a supervision session?
Well, good point. Because for me, because I have the relationships with the peers who we supervise, we can do a check-in and be able to kind of support them and make sure things are all right. But in the formal type of supervision, there's some documentations involved, sitting down that the organization requires that it be followed up through, and so that's the difference. And that part is having that following up with the documentation that the organization is requiring. Um, but in terms of the support, I think we build our relationships, a collaborative thing with leadership. I mean, with my people I supervise, that I'm going to be there to give them the support and guidance, and they're free to ask and suggest what they need. How I can support them. So.
Um, can you, it might be putting you on the spot. What is some of the documentation that's required for when you do a supervision?
Well, there's a documentation that we send them, they have to send in every week. On the week before, how many participants they have, on all of these, what was working, successful contacts, self-care, what did you do? And, a lot of the things they send and we speak. Once we get that in supervision, we go over that. Once we go over that, we make comments at the bottom to give it back to them. And then we have to open up go into our caseload and go through that and identify who's going to be closed out. We have to document all those, which I can do without that formal piece, but that needs to be on that date. The paperwork has to be. So
Um, Let me ask you another question, one last one. Do you find that level of documentation weekly, is it helpful?
that level, it's interesting you say that because some parts of it is, but not to the
Hmm.
level they're asking, because I think we can create um, a reasonable amount of information for the documentation piece and that the peer gets supported.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Virginia, yes.
Yeah, I've heard some really good comments in this discussion around this questions of errors. And one of the comments that really resonates with me is when Ed talked about trust. And one of the errors that can be very problematic is when the supervisor doesn't lacks the trust in the supervisee. And they're micromanaging the outcomes. They're really attached to the outcome and not allowing the supervisee to, to having the trust in the supervisee to handle the situation and use their best judgment. And I think that's like a major, one of the major errors that I've seen, and that's around the area of trust. Is there
Yeah.
trust in the relationship?
Right. And which side does that fall on? Is
Right.
because I think if I've often said there's usually two type of people, a person that trusts everyone until they give them a reason not to, and
Mm.
a person that trusts no one until they give them a reason to. And if you're the type of person that trusts no one until they give you a reason to, should you be in a supervisory role? I don't know. I guess it might depend on agency culture. If you're in a gotcha type of culture, I'm going to catch you doing something bad, then that might be the right type of supervisor. But that's not the type of supervisor I want to work for. But that's a
Exactly.
great,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great point, Virginia. Thank you. Barry.
Yeah, I think because the different level of responsibility from a supervisor and an employee, that there's always a perceived monologue instead of an open dialogue. You know, when someone walks, when you supervise someone, they look to you as to kind of tell them, as as opposed to being willing to be open and share with each other. And I think that's the error. It's always perceived that because your responsibility is different, then you have to be treated different, or you treat them different instead of being able to be open, like you said, walk beside them, even though you do have a different responsibility because
Yeah.
and you have to acknowledge that, but you don't have to treat them that way. I don't think.
Okay. I'm with you there. I agree. Ruth.
Building on what Barry has just said, a question like this, Phil, I always come back to the spectrum of attitudes and what is
Mhm.
the philosophy behind our service delivery. And supervision is a service. We can think about supervision as a service. I certainly do. Um, and your original question, so what is it that we get wrong as supervisors? Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I think the root of the rot in the relationship, and I agree with that it's all about relationships, is that we treat our supervisees as recipients,
Yeah.
Mhm.
not as resources, not as fellow professionals who are doing doing important work for the benefit of the agency as a whole, for the benefit of the clients of the agency. And I think that gets back to a fundamental principle behind the relationship. If my supervisor is treating me as a recipient, well, I'll get some benefit from that. There's no question about that. And I engaged her as my supervisor because she is a woman with a very vastly more experience and a lot of expertise to communicate with me. And I'm very grateful for it. But the bottom line is that sort of that we're all fellow professionals and we should be, I believe, treating each other as resources and as the experts on our own lives. I don't expect my supervisor to understand what coaching is. She's a clinical person. I expect her to understand what mentoring is. I expect her to understand what supervision is. I will tell her from my expertise as a working coach what my role is, and I will ask her about difficulties, disruptions to my professional serenity, barriers, whatever the issues are that are coming up for me in my practice. And if I have nothing to say, she'll surely be asking me some of those nice, open-ended questions, and it will be a conversation. It will be, for want of a better word, it will be a peer conversation. And ideally, and certainly in my practice, it will be governed by working agreements, the same working agreements that we put in place for our training programs. So that's my dos pesos, as Bill Gonzalez would say, on your original question, Phil.
Okay. Um, I was, I have seen, and I recently went out to Colorado and saw this in full force, and this is my interpretation, that sometimes when coaches or recovery coaches become supervisors, ego runs riot. And it's kind of like almost the tragic flaw of working a program of recovery. The thing that brings that down a lot of people's recovery is their pride and their ego. You know, pride cometh before the fall, right? And so I've seen people, for lack of a better term, become a supervisor and get on a power trip. You know, they want to go into the managerial, administrative part and start talking about, I think it was Amber or somebody talked about micromanaging, maybe Virginia or whatever, but it was this micromanaging, and then they set up these barriers of inaccessibility. Like, I actually heard a guy said, there is no way I'm accepting a call from one of my coaches on a Saturday. I have to set up that professional boundary. And I just thought it kind of winced a little bit at that, because if it was me, even as executive director, I knew I was on 24/7, that if Jolie was calling me at Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, I knew I probably had better answer that call. It just never would have occurred to me not to, from anyone that was on staff, and that kind of goes to what Travis was about, professional friend or friendly professional, and I guess you have this boundary issue. You become almost very do as I say, now as said, not what I do. And what Ruth, you're talking about recipients, I've seen supervisors that were once coaches treat everybody like they're coaches, like objects, all of a sudden. And I don't know if it was the demands of the job, or the administrative tasks or the functions, that this happens. And I think that becomes, in a lot of ways, and I don't know if this is completely accurate, but I've seen it enough, but I don't know that you can generalize, but it seems almost to be like a clinical model, where the supervisors are just checking the managerial administrative boxes and have very little to do with the administrative. You're an employee. You were late 3 times this week. I'm gonna have to write you up, and let's get that done, and just using that power, without asking any questions, without figuring out what's going on or whatever, but that kind of stuff. So good. Amber, you raised your hand in response to my little rant there. I answered my own question for you, but that's what I was thinking.
I love the rants. Then it gets me going. So, um, yeah, I like that you were talking about this because, like, in my personal situation, I was a coach prior to becoming supervisor, not for very long though. So, um, it was an odd situation where, the position opened up and I really had to figure it out as I went along, right? And like I said
Mhm.
before, the program was much smaller. So, for me, like playing kind of the devil's advocate here, it was a difficult and challenging thing for me to figure out because, I really loved the coaching aspect of it, right? And I still was taking on call shifts and I'm still working with my own peers. And then you add on the manager and the administrative qualities. And then it's like if I didn't put up those boundaries of like I can't answer the phone at nighttime or on weekends, my self-care and my boundaries were just gone. So like working 60 some hours a week, like eventually there's going to be burnout. So like that was tough for me too because it was like I could see myself, you know, uh it wasn't an ego thing. It was more of like I became less less approachable, I think, because, taking on and being busy and like stressed out or whatever it was, like it seems like, the coaches aren't on the same level as me, but not by choice. So like I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but it was like I became, where I've always been more like straight to the point, right? And like super compassionate, but don't really, as far as emotions go, I'm more like get it done, right? And so like I feel like when my time is cut very short, I'm not giving like that emotional support to the coaches, which then turns into probably them thinking that I have these ego issues, or maybe it comes off that way, but it's just trying to, balance, which is what we talked about before. So I really appreciate you saying that because it's like, it just keeps, it's a reminder for me. Like, it's still super important to make sure like the coaches know that I am on the same level as them. It's just, I gotta, figure out maybe different ways to balance it. Right.
Well, there's a few things in here, Amber. So you say you're on the same level, but you're not because
I want
if
to be, but I'm
I
not.
know, but if you're like in an organizational hierarchy,
Hmm.
that and that's why I don't really like organizational hierarchies, is that you are given power to put that on a different level than they are. So my question to you is, you ready? Can I
Hmm.
ask it? That it sounds almost that, and I'm just kind of reflecting what you said, that you are given this power very early in your career here, right?
Hmm.
To oversee other coaches. How do you think you handled it overall? And
Mm.
what did the power do to your ego in your head?
I mean, I think that like I have made it work. It's just
Hmm.
reflecting on, there's some coaches that started with me, and obviously there's a lot of transition and everything like that. But, when people bring it to attention to other coaches, or like, I have to be aware that like sometimes how I come off isn't what I mean, and like I didn't have to deal with that before. And that's the
Right?
thing is like, dealing with peers and going into hospitals and stuff like that. I'm just me where it's like, I'm very good at all the manager stuff and I can do it in my sleep and like that's totally fine, but like I feel like then part of that is lost. So I think it's just it's been a growing thing for me, is just like understanding that like being in both roles at the same time is difficult. But I mean, it is doable. It's just I got to be aware of like my interactions with the coaches and just maybe tread a little bit more lightly, right? Of how I come off to people.
Well, you and I have that very similar thing that I had to learn how to, and it sounds, but I'm reading this whole fantasy power thing anyway. So, but we have to learn when we're given positions of authority in an organization, it's how to wield that power. And I was very much like you. I was Phil wherever I went. And but I also have to be honest with myself and said there's part of me that was thrilled and enjoyed having power, and I had to learn to temper that and realize that that power is as much a burden as it is a blessing, right? It's what you do with it that matters. And so again, I'm referencing Jolie a lot, but she was In a way, she was kind of my supervisor in some senses, in some sense. And she would say, Phil, you don't realize the effect you have on people, especially like when I'm goofing around and kidding around and they see me as the executive director or this person that has some standing in the recovery movement. And I'm just goofing around and teasing them and might end up hurting them with not realizing I was doing that because that wasn't my intention. So part of my recovery process is becoming more and more self-aware. And so that's two parts, right? It's the internal awareness of what's going on inside, and then there's the external social awareness of how my affect, what that effect has on other people. And that's exactly what you were talking about, Amber. So we share that in common as far as, and I think supervisors when you're overseeing people have to be completely aware of how, as best they can, is how their attitude, their words, their demeanor is affecting other people, especially the people we supervise. Any thoughts on that? Anybody else? What are you thinking?
I'll share.
Yeah, Pete,
Phil.
we haven't heard from you yet. Good to see you.
Oh yeah, thank you for doing this.
Mhm.
Yeah, my first thought is that when I think of a supervisor, is that they're ultimately, to me, they're the decision maker, right? Um,
Mhm.
and as far as some of the errors, I agree with with you that there's a lot of ego that gets in the way. I think to add to that is that sometimes they think just because they're in that position, they know everything, or
Mhm.
things that
Sure.
I've actually experienced. Like they make a process that has no significance in the overall scheme of things. Like I had a supervisor that didn't like the way I did my bullets, believe it or not, and made sure that every time I didn't do it the way she wanted, she sent it back. Paperwork, like you said, administrative paperwork. So I think, and there's this guy out there, some of you might be familiar, Jocko. He has a podcast and he talks about, he was a Navy SEAL, but he talks about the administrative aspect of it too and how it can have an effect on people because we look to our supervisors as people that of authority sometimes. And sometimes we'll take what they say to heart rather than check in and make sure it's something they really want. Kind of like what you alluded to, how you joke around and then people, will kind of, uh, have an effect on it. Like I'll give you a perfect example. I just recently had an experience with a coworker where our executive director said, "Oh, we don't need any books," and this coworker was helping me to order books, and so she just thought to herself, "Okay, we don't need any books," but I have been telling her for over 2 weeks I need books, and guess what? Day before class, oh, I didn't order books because I thought Vince said we didn't need books. She didn't even check in with me. And I'm just like, oh man, I tried to really be cool about it. But anyway, we got the books. But I guess what I'm saying is, even some cavalier statements can be misunderstood, by the people that supervisors oversee and lead. So those are my thoughts. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, so why did he say that about not needing books?
Yeah, good question. There was confusion because we had two classes that we had scheduled. We have an in-person and a virtual, and we
Oh.
did, yeah, and the virtual was going to get postponed. Well, even though I had been telling our bookkeeper, that we had zero books, I need some books. She just, I don't know, God. Anyway, I don't want to get into it because it gets me upset because it was like this is not the first time it's happened, where this person is not, she's not
Okay.
helping me. How about that?
Hmm.
And I think that's what the ultimate role of a supervisor is that, yeah, we make decisions, yeah, we help guide, yeah, we hold policy. I liked how Ruth distinguished it, because unfortunately there are some organizations where you gotta you as a supervisor you gotta make quick decisions, right? And you can't wait sometimes.
Hmm.
But anyway, the point is I think our ultimate role is to really guide. Someone said that, and I really that resonated with me. We're there to support our team and guide them, but then also hold a place of authority because somebody's got to make a decision at some point on things that are happening in that group. So
Hmm. Okay. Ed, you okay? What are you thinking about? You got this pensive look.
Wow. One of the things that's bothering me constantly about conversations, and this is a conversation that I always find very important. I think many recovery coaches, peers become supervisors.
Right.
I don't, and sometimes we speak of supervision and managing people as the same thing,
Mhm.
and they're totally different. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of the difficulty in coming up with answers to the issues.
Talk to me about the differences.
Managers carry out the agency's regulations and things that have been established as this is how we do it.
Hmm.
Supervisors report to managers, and supervisors' function is to oversee, to make sure that what is happening is feeding into the company line or agency's line of this is what we are and this is how we do it.
Hmm.
I think so many times a recovery coach becomes a manager. And when we introduce recovery coaches and peers, did we create a new job opportunity in every agency for supervisors? Because we didn't need supervisors. And I think managers had to then take on the role of supervision.
Hmm.
And because of the two different roles, they're what lane am I in today? And how quickly can I move from one lane to the other? Which hat am I wearing at any point in time?
Hmm.
We put an emphasis on supervision, and we train and can educate people how to become supervisors. I've never heard anyone going to attend a managerial training to become a manager.
Hmm. That's a good point. Yeah,
And yet we're asking them to do supervision. And actually, do they know how to do manager? And how did they learn to do managerial work?
yeah. And like Ruth just put in the chat, supervision is being touted in the field as a career path for peer support specialists. And I think another thing that I learned from Bill White decades ago, probably now, is a lot of times in the clinical treatment world, you'd have an outstanding clinician or counselor who was just phenomenal with the people who they serve, their clients. They would get promoted to being a clinical supervisor or a manager, and they were shit at it. And so not only did the organization now has a problem because they have a clinical supervisor who isn't very good at that role, plus they've lost an outstanding counselor. So
Hmm.
now what do? It's twofold. So it's that idea that, kind of like in sports, right? It's sometimes it's not the greatest player who became the best manager. There were some of the guys that were like just kind of so-so players, might not even play professionally, but they played somewhere else that end up being outstanding managers and coaches and supervisors or whatever, or administrators. We don't do a good job in the field or many fields really at picking out. You have a great person who's a great coach, loves to be there, is great with the people they serve, but why do we insist on moving them up or considering them for promotion and not accurately assessing whether they'd be a good supervisor or manager? It's a different skill set in a lot of ways. Can you learn it? Yes. But Amber was here and I kind of wonder which role she likes better. She liked better, which one did she really like better? What did she enjoy more? Ruth.
Well, Phil, if I may, isn't that an old problem? Um,
Yeah.
in hierarchical systems,
Hmm.
um, the best and the brightest, so to speak, are promoted beyond the level of their competence.
Yes.
So, and you end up with exactly what you've described. You lost a terrific mid-level worker and created a, a barely functioning higher level worker.
Mhm.
And that's inherent in hierarchical systems. And we've had this issue where, sort of, around peer support specialists from minute one. From
Mhm.
minute one in treatment agencies and in behavioral health system generally, the assumption has been that your non-clinical professional, that is to say a peer, that their career path has to take them out of the non-clinical role, has to either put them in some kind of Yahoo supervisory role, and I say Yahoo uh, because peers support specialists don't actually have the qualifications to be
Mhm.
full-blown supervisors. They're not
Mhm.
recognized as full-blown supervisors. They're not supervisors from the perspective of being answerable for Medicaid and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's one career path that's being touted, taking them out of the peer role. The other older career path that is touted all day, every day as a career path for non-clinical people is into the alcohol and other drugs counselor role. It's called a KSAC in New York State.
Mhm.
That's not a peer role. It's not non-clinical.
Right.
And so what you're doing is you're taking somebody who's highly motivated as a non-clinical professional, and you're telling them that the only advancement in their career is to do something else.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a part where I've even seen it at CCAR where uh, and we tried, of course we have a hierarchy, but I don't know how you build an organization without one. And I mean it's kind of confusing to try to do that. But there is like a perceived ladder that people want to climb, and just it's like a natural. It's a natural progression. People want to, I think they want to have more authority. They want to have people working for them. They want more dollars. They want more recognition. They want more power. And so, those paths you were talking about, a lot of that is the supervision role is one step up a ladder, right? To wherever they perceive that ladder is going to go, but they want to keep climbing. And I wonder about, you know, is climbing the real purpose of a career? Is it the real purpose of living? Do you want to always just climb the ladder to have more, whatever that may be. But that's just me thinking. Here's the last question that maybe it'll take up the time, and depending on how this goes, there may be more a part two to this, but what do you do when your supervisee or your recovery coach, the coach you're supervising, screws up? What is your response? Come on now. The person you're supervising really has screwed up. They're caught red-handed, no doubt about it. What do you do? Do you have an example of what you did do? You don't have to use any names. Shireen.
For me, it doesn't feel good. I'm just saying if I was in that situation, I'm saying if I was in that situation, I
Right.
would feel like now it's
I
not,
agree.
I don't trust that person anymore. And what do I do with my feelings? How do I stuff my feelings? Because no matter what, you still got to work. You still got to manage your stuff and keep going. So what do I do with that? there is always somebody always over that you can always go to. And I want to say like a crutch that will help you through that process, because this is a person that you trusted, you thought was okay, had your back, work related, and that's a person that really wasn't. So it doesn't feel good, it's misleading. And then it makes you wonder, well, was I doing my job good, or were they just pacifying me because of a situation? So a lot of questions make you think, and going to that other higher person is really the one that's going to bring you back to let you know, listen, is it was it whatever the situation was, they can recreate, construct it and put you back together, because that'll make me fall apart. You know what I mean? So falling apart is because I felt one way, happy, and then all of a sudden everything was snatched from under me, and then I feel down and depressed like I was the bad person. Not a good feeling.
Yeah, well, I'll talk more about that in a bit. Thank you, Shireen. Virginia.
Yeah, yeah, it's really not a good feeling, but I think for me, what's worked is to, you utilize this as a learning opportunity for both me and the supervisee. Like, what can we learn from this situation to do differently the next time? And it may be that we need to replay the situation and falling back on our ethics. How could we have dealt with this situation in a different way to get a different type of positive outcome? So it's just about going back and rehashing whatever occurred. Um, and also for me as a supervisor, like relying on my supervisor, to talk about the frustration and angry part that may come up for me. But beyond that, it's utilizing the situation as a learning opportunity.
Got you. Thank you. Barry.
I think first, and I guess it depends on the level, the nature of the screw up. But first, I think you support the person. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you support the person, and
Mhm.
even though you may have to be honest about the apparent consequences, the person comes first as a person. You know what I mean? You
Oh,
may
yeah.
not no control over the outcome of the consequences. It depends on the nature of the screw up, but you make sure you can make sure the person is okay as a person, and see what next steps are for them. Whether if they're terminated, what's next? What's the possible next step? What can you do? If it's not that level, how can we rectify the situation where it don't happen again? You know
Hmm.
what I mean? You give them some choices, but I think first and foremost, you address the person and make sure the person, is clear and okay.
Yeah, thank you. Ruth.
Thank you, Phil. I really like what Barry said. Once again, Barry, we're on the same page.
Hmm.
Um, the first thing I like to do in any screw up is to confirm that nobody died.
That's good.
And that can segue into, because sometimes people do. And
Hmm.
that can then segue into a conversation about figuring out what can be done, what needs to be done. Is there anything to be done to fix any immediate damage? Do we need to call 911?
Hmm.
So that we come to grips with the sort of with the immediate logistics, sort of what are the specifics of this monumental fuck up,
Yeah.
and sort of and where are some priorities that need to be addressed right here, right now. I agree with Barry very much so that, sort of that my initial loyalty my loyalty is to my staff member, but I've also got loyalties to the agency. I've got loyalties to the client. Sort of I've got a range of loyalties exactly as we discuss in ethics. All of the impacted parties and all of the parties I'm answerable to. And I have to be aware that, sort of that whatever this situation is, all of those parties are present, and I have responsibilities to a greater or lesser extent to all of them. And I really appreciate whoever it was, and I'm sorry I didn't catch, who brought in the question of ethics, because this is absolutely an ethical situation and needs to be addressed from our ethical training and from an ethical perspective.
Sure. Thank
So,
you.
so that's where I start with. And
Right.
then the business about, learning opportunities and so on, that comes later.
Yeah. Thank you. Travis,
How did I know you were going to call on me?
because you were looking away, like, please don't call on
Well,
me.
a lot of things have been pulled out of my brain here in the last few minutes, but yeah, I'm with Ruth. I think depending on the level of fuck up, as she said it, your words, not mine, Ruth.
Uh-huh.
There might have to be some damage control right in the beginning. Like what there's some immediate needs that need to be filled so that we can continue forward. But back to what Barry was saying too, and Simon Sinek said this, supervision isn't about being in charge, it's about taking care of the people that are in your charge. So maybe
Mhm.
that's point B, to address it with the direct report that messed up, whatever's going on. We don't know. What's going on? What do you need that you're not getting? Barry, we talked about that the other day. What do you need that you're not getting? And I think that'll give us some indication on how to move forward. We might find out that they have something going on in their personal life, and now we're giving them this opportunity to be seen. Maybe that's what they need. But I think there are a lot of levels to this, Phil, and this conversation's been great. So thank you, everyone.
Say the or post the Simon Sinek thing in the chat.
I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Um, as you can imagine, 25 years at CCAR, I've had some uh, supervised, managed a lot of people. And there was a time where, some of us talked about being able to go up to your own supervisor, which as executive director would be the board chair. And it came down that I had to make a decision whether to keep the person who was number two in charge. And it had deteriorated to the point where I didn't think it was workable anymore. So I went to the board and chair, and he said, this is his level. You hope they're going to make the decision for you. And he said, this is your decision, and I'll support the decision no matter which one it is. And I'm like, dang. So this is one of the things when I talk about power, when you are a supervisor, you literally have the power or great influence to fire somebody. Like, right, I mean, let's get down to the brass tacks that you have that ability to say you're no longer employed here, right? And that's a lot of, I think, what Shireen and Virginia were talking about. It doesn't feel good when it might be that level of screw up, right? That warrants termination. How have I handled that? And I know it sounds a little corny and it sounds a little trite, but it was the essence of how we approached human resources predicaments or quandaries is we didn't fire anyone. The employee fired themselves. And that has always been our mentality because there are bosses, there are supervisors, and this is where I think we talk a little bit about ego and arrogance and power that like to fire people. That it's some kind of power trip that they like to they almost like to let people go, and that breaks my heart because it doesn't make any sense business wise or humanity wise because we've invested, the agency has invested time, dollars, resources, and we want to see you do well. We're not here to see you do poorly or to screw up. That doesn't mean you won't, but if you do, and this is the flip side to supervisor managers that might tie into the problem, we have to hold you accountable to that. And the other part with a lot of supervisor, not only is there a power, there's a fear, I would say, of confrontation that they'll just let anything go, just let anything go. I'm one of you, you're one of me. All right, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Try to do better next time. And it's that balance between compassion, understanding, care, like taking care of those in your charge, to holding them accountable and say, this can't work here. This doesn't fly. It's not part of our culture. This is not what we do. You're not, obviously, by these actions, you're not a good fit for this role. And man, I've had those conversations more than I like to. I've admitted, like to have done. But the more you do it, the more you get a little better at it, and the more your understanding and your clarity improves. I'm not firing you because I don't like you. I'm firing you because you did this. You're being let go because you did this. Is there an alternative? Do I have an alternative? And most people at that point go, yeah, I agree. Okay, I see. Ruth.
One of the things that I try to work with in ethics trainings, Phil, is the great question, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
And I try to suggest to folks that one of your skills as an employee, as a worker, is being aware of what are you thinking. So that when your supervisor comes around and says, what were you thinking? You did X, Y, and Z. What were you thinking? You'll actually have a clear answer to the question so that you're giving your supervisor or anybody else who wants to ask you, you're giving them the tools to assess, sort of whether you're a mindful, respectful, responsible professional. Your supervisor doesn't have to agree with what you did, but you're giving folks an opportunity of an explanation of where you were coming from, and you're laying the groundwork for a conversation for how you might approach this particular kind of issue differently moving forward. But if you ask me, what were you thinking, Ruth? You did X, Y, and Z. What were you thinking? And I say, I don't know. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Well, I'm not giving you anything to work with. And I do think that that's part of ethical considerations and ethical training.
I mean, we've had a lot of people do some things that question was unanswerable. They did exactly what you said. I said, "What were you thinking?" I don't know. Like, why were you texting those pictures on your work phone? Those kinds of things. And you go like, what are we going to do? What are you going to do with that? I mean, you just wonder about people sometimes. That's like what I think like the screw ups are like amazing sometimes. But I don't think we do any favors on the flip side of letting it go. You hurt your reputation, you hurt the person, you hurt more people could be harmed. I mean, you can't So a lot of times, that's the stress of being a manager or supervisor is having to make those difficult calls and decisions when people do screw up. Ed.
As a trainer or a facilitator, I
Mhm.
have limited agency experience. I've had other experiences working in companies for a number of years. I would hope as a agency that they have an employee handbook
Oh, yeah.
that stipulates
Hmm.
the do's and don'ts, because every other company I ever worked with, we had to sign it, we had to read it, and every year we had a review of it.
Hmm.
So in working as a supervisor and dealing with someone who did wrong, so to speak, like many others, I would do every attempt to stop the bleeding that they hurt themselves with.
Hmm.
Once the bleeding is stopped, are they going to be okay? And then address the outcome of how do we move forward. And the first place I would always go to is based on what was done. Sit down with human resources, if there's any legal, whatever, and the handbook, and go over that, because that will tell me a direction on which I may have to go down. The second thing is, if it's not in the handbook, it becomes more of a local departmental thing, and I can address it that way with the blessings of human resources. But I think err on being kind as opposed to err on being indifferent or mean
Of
or
course.
not understanding.
I agree with that. And when I took over as executive director, one of the first things I did was hire a consultant who built us a personnel policies and procedure manual because we didn't have one. And like working for 3 years, not under one was like it, it was it was hell in a lot of ways. And
Awesome.
so um, Jolie and I worked on that, and many of the CCAR people here know that that's withstood the test of time. There's been modifications, but you look at Jolie's and it's got, tattered and torn and, post-it notes and places to access. And there's parts, where words have been challenged and policies, and we've made modifications along the way. But that's kind of what you do with it. But it's the guideline that we all agree. It's our overall working agreement for signing on to the agency. And there's Mr. Bobby Brown. Always good to see Mr. Bobby Brown. So coach extraordinaire right there. Anybody have any last thoughts before we hop on? Anything you want to share about supervision? Do we need to do maybe not, you know, well, I'll save those thoughts for later. But my thought is, CCAR had put out the coacher vision. I think right now that maybe that title has lost it, is not suitable, especially in this landscape. I think we just have to put it back, supervision for recovery coaches. Take a look at a lot of what was offered today by all of you and see how well that fits into the curriculum and see if there needs to be an update to it because supervision is becoming more and more prominent in the recovery coach field. And, Amber seems to have handled it well, but I've seen that too often. You're a coach for a little while, hire more coaches. Well, let's get the first coach we hired and let them supervise those coaches. And you're like, what? They're like, what? What do I do with that? All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. See you next time, next month, hopefully. Take care, everybody.